Wounded alien girl faces death until a human medic gives her a new cybernetic life. The bridge between worlds. The acrid smell of plasma burns and antiseptic filled the makeshift field hospital. Dr. Rhiannon Vale's hands remained steady despite the distant rumble of artillery that occasionally shook dust from the ceiling of the repurposed mining facility. The wounded Luminari soldier on her table wasn't supposed to be her problem. Enemy combatants were typically left to their own medical corps after basic stabilization. But this one was different. Vitals dropping, called her assistant Jensen, a lanky medic with perpetually worried eyes. We should just stabilize and transfer her to containment with the others. Rhiannon studied the Luminari's mangled arm, or what remained of it. The crystalline blood, characteristic of their species, had congealed around the wound, forming jagged translucent structures that glittered under the harsh surgical lights. Beautiful in a morbid way. Look at these neural patterns, Rhiannon said, pointing to her scanner. They're remarkably similar to human structures, just with crystalline components instead of carbon-based ones. And that arm isn't salvageable, but I think I can. You can't seriously be considering a prosthetic integration, Jensen interrupted. For an enemy combatant, command would never. Command isn't in this operating theater, Rhiannon snapped. I am, and I don't see an enemy. I see a patient with remarkably compatible neural architecture. The Luminari's eyes flickered open, pale violet irises set against obsidian sclera. They focused on Rhiannon with startling clarity for someone who should be unconscious from pain and blood loss. Finish it, the Luminari's voice was like wind chimes, melodic even in distress. Death, preferable to capture. Rhiannon leaned closer. I'm not capturing you, I'm saving you. Your arm can't be saved, but I have something better. The Luminari's eyes widened slightly, the bioluminescent markings along her temples pulsing with what Rhiannon had learned to recognize as confusion. Why help, she managed, her translator implant struggling with her weakened state. Because I'm a doctor first, a soldier second, Rhiannon replied, reaching for a sealed container beneath the operating table. And because you're going to be my masterpiece. The container hissed as she unlocked it, revealing a gleaming prosthetic limb unlike standard military issue. This was Rhiannon's personal project, built from salvaged Luminari tech and human bioengineering principles. Theoretical, untested, and absolutely against protocol. Jensen recorded that Lieutenant Gerald died on the table. Massive trauma, unsalvageable. Rhiannon's voice was steady as she prepared the neural connectors. That's falsifying. That's an order, she fixed him with a stare that had cowed far more senior officers. What happens in my operating theater stays here, understood. Jensen hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. The Luminari Lieutenant Gerald watched the exchange with growing awareness. You risk much. My name is Rhiannon Vale, she said, administering a specialized anesthetic designed to work with Luminari physiology. And you are. Tavern, the Luminari whispered as the drugs began to take effect. Tavern Gerald, 3rd Battalion, Crystal Vanguard. Well, Tavern of the Crystal Vanguard, when you wake up, you're going to have the most advanced cybernetic arm in 2 species arsenals. Rhiannon smiled grimly. Try not to use it to kill me, all right. Tavern's bioluminescent markings pulsed once in what might have been amusement before she slipped into unconsciousness. The surgery took 6 hours. The integration of the neural interface with Tavern's crystalline nervous system required precision beyond standard military medical protocols. Twice, the Luminari's unique physiology threatened to reject the implant, and twice Rhiannon adjusted her approach, synthesizing new connection compounds on the fly. When it was done, Rhiannon stepped back, exhausted but satisfied. The prosthetic arm, a sleek construction of platinum alloys and synthetic crystal, was successfully attached. In theory, it would not only restore function but enhance it, integrating with Tavern's natural bioluminescence to create a perfect fusion of both species' technologies. Jensen had long since been dismissed, unable to stomach his complicity in what he considered treason. Rhiannon knew she'd have to deal with him later, but for now she had a more immediate concern, hiding a supposedly dead Luminari officer until she recovered. You look terrible, came a musical voice from the doorway. Rhiannon turned to find Dr. Naomi Akafer, the only other senior medical officer who shared her controversial views on interspecies medicine. You try performing experimental cybernetic surgery after a 20-hour shift, Rhiannon replied, peeling off her surgical gloves. Naomi whistled low as she approached the operating table, examining the prosthetic integration. That's not standard issue. That's your prototype, isn't it? The one you've been developing from the artifacts we found on Proxima Delta. It was this or let her die, Rhiannon said defensively. I'm not judging, Naomi raised her hands. But command will, we need to move her before the morning inspection. They transferred Tavern to an unused storage room that Rhiannon had converted into a private recovery space months ago for her more unorthodox patients. As they settled the luminary on the bed, her new arm caught the light, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the walls. It's responding to her natural bioluminescence, Rhiannon observed. The crystalline matrices are already synchronizing with her nervous system. It's beautiful, Naomi admitted. But beauty won't save either of you if Colonel Mercer discovers this. Rhiannon nodded grimly. Colonel Diana Mercer was a hardliner who saw the war in black and white terms. The Luminari were the enemy, and the only good enemy was a dead one, or one being aggressively interrogated for intelligence. I need 48 hours, just until she's stable enough to move. Naomi sighed. I'll help cover your shifts, but Rhiannon, be careful, there's something different about this one. The markings on her face, those are military elite caste patterns. Rhiannon looked back at Tavern's face, noticing the intricate crystalline lines that traced from her temples down her neck, disappearing beneath her medical gown. All the more reason to save her, Rhiannon said quietly. Maybe she knows something that could help end this war. Tavern woke 12 hours later, the transition from unconsciousness to awareness instantaneous in the way unique to luminary physiology. One moment she was still, the next she was fully alert, violet eyes scanning her surroundings. Rhiannon, who had been dozing in a chair beside the bed, startled awake. Easy, she said as Tavern tried to sit up. The neural pathways are still stabilizing. Tavern stared at her new arm, the prosthetic gleaming with inner light that pulsed in rhythm with her heart. Slowly, she raised it, watching as fingers of metal and crystal responded to her thoughts. How? The question held wonder rather than suspicion. I've been studying luminary physiology for years, Rhiannon explained, moving closer to check the integration points. Your species' crystalline nervous system is remarkably adaptable, more so than our carbon-based one. The arm uses elements from both our technologies. Tavern flexed the fingers, watching as light coursed through the transparent components. It feels alive. In a way it is, the prosthetic learns and adapts. The more you use it, the more natural it will become. The luminary's gaze shifted from the arm to Rhiannon's face, studying her with an intensity that made Rhiannon uncomfortable. Why save enemy? Tavern asked, her translator implant still struggling with complex sentence structures. Rhiannon hesitated. The truth was complicated, part scientific curiosity, part ethical conviction, and part something she wasn't ready to name. Because I'm tired of this war, she finally said. Because every time I patch up another soldier just so they can go back to killing, I feel like I'm betraying my oath as a doctor. Luminari have no such conflict, Tavern said, but her eyes betrayed uncertainty. Duty is clear, fight until victory or death. And yet here you are, accepting my help. Tavern looked away, alternative was death, logic dictated survival. Logic, Rhiannon smiled faintly. That's what we all tell ourselves when we break from doctrine, isn't it? When we do something that feels right instead of what we're told is right. Before Tavern could respond, an alarm blared through the facility. Rhiannon cursed, moving quickly to the door. Stay here, stay quiet, she ordered, then paused. And if anyone other than me comes through that door. Use new arm to defend, Tavern finished, the prosthetic already glowing brighter with combat readiness. Rhiannon nodded and slipped out, securing the door behind her. In the corridor, medical personnel rushed toward the main ward. She caught Jensen's arm as he passed. What's happening? His expression was grim. Surprise inspection, Colonel Mercer herself. She's heard rumors about unauthorized medical procedures. Rhiannon's blood ran cold. Who told her? Jensen wouldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry, Dr. Vale, but what you're doing, it's treason. The Luminari killed my brother at Ceres Station. She released him as if burned. You have no idea what you've done. As Jensen hurried away, Rhiannon stood frozen in the corridor. She had minutes, perhaps less, before Mercer's security team searched the entire facility. Her mind raced through options, each worse than the last. Then she felt a presence behind her and turned to find Tavern, standing unsteadily in the storage room doorway. They come for me, the Luminari stated. It wasn't a question. For both of us, Rhiannon corrected, making a split-second decision. How well can you move with that arm? Tavern flexed the prosthetic, watching as light rippled through it with increasing confidence. Better each moment, neural integration accelerating. Good, because we're leaving. Rhiannon pulled an emergency pack from a nearby cabinet, something she'd prepared weeks ago for a scenario she'd hoped would never come. I know a way to the surface through the old mining tunnels. Why help escape? Tavern asked, her head tilted in that distinctly luminary way that suggested genuine confusion. You could claim I forced you. Rhiannon laughed bitterly. With Mercer, no chance. Besides, that arm contains all my research data. I'm not letting it fall into military hands. They'd weaponize it in a heartbeat. Tavern studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Then we go together, but know this, Dr. Vale, once clear of danger, we are still enemy. Fair enough, Rhiannon agreed, handing Tavern a set of standard-issue fatigues to cover her distinctive luminary features. But until then, we're just two people trying to survive. As they slipped into the service corridor that would lead them to the mining tunnels, Rhiannon wondered if she'd finally lost her mind. She was risking everything, her career, her freedom, possibly her life, for an enemy soldier and a theoretical breakthrough in cybernetic integration. But watching how the prosthetic arm moved in perfect harmony with Tavern's natural movements, already adapting and evolving to better suit its host, Rhiannon couldn't bring herself to regret her choice. Something profound was happening with this integration, something that transcended the petty conflicts of their species. The distant sound of booted feet echoed through the corridor, spurring them to move faster. As they descended into the darkness of the mining tunnels, Rhiannon couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading not just away from the military base, but toward something neither of them fully understood. Whatever awaited them, one thing was certain. The bridge she'd built between their biologies was only the beginning. Convergent evolution. The wilderness of Helios 9 was an unforgiving landscape of twisted metallic vegetation and crystalline rock formations that caught the pale light of twin moons. Rhiannon and Tavern had been traveling for 3 days, keeping to ravines and dense thickets of wire-like trees to avoid both human and luminary patrols. They made an unlikely pair, Rhiannon with her dark hair cropped military short and Tavern towering a full head taller, her silvery skin catching moonlight with subtle luminescence despite the muddy camouflage they'd applied. The prosthetic arm had exceeded all expectations, not only functioning perfectly but seeming to evolve daily, developing new neural connections and even beginning to generate its own bioluminescent patterns that mirrored Tavern's natural markings. We should reach the abandoned research outpost by nightfall, Rhiannon said, consulting her portable mapping unit, assuming it hasn't been compromised. Tavern nodded, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. The past days had seen a gradual shift in their relationship, from wary allies to something approaching respect. Necessity had forced them to learn each other's strengths. Rhiannon's medical knowledge and survival training complemented by Tavern's enhanced senses and growing mastery of her new limb. Your military will have predicted this route, Tavern observed, her translator implant now perfectly synced to her speech patterns. They know you're thinking. Probably, Rhiannon admitted, but they don't know about the outpost. It was abandoned after the initial Luminari attack, officially listed as destroyed. My friend Naomi and I discovered it intact last year during a scouting mission. And you did not report this discovery, it wasn't a question. Rhiannon shrugged, we needed a place to conduct research that wasn't entirely sanctioned. Tavern's bioluminescent markings pulsed with what Rhiannon had come to recognize as amusement. You have always been a rule breaker then. I prefer independent thinker, Rhiannon replied with a half-smile. They fell silent as they navigated a particularly treacherous section of terrain, where the ground itself seemed to undulate with slow, geological patience. Helios 9 was a young planet, still finding its equilibrium after the massive terraforming operations of a century prior. The arm, Tavern said suddenly, holding up the prosthetic limb as they paused at the ridge of a crystalline formation. It dreams. Rhiannon turned sharply, what do you mean? When I sleep it processes I see, images, calculations, sometimes memories that are not my own. Tavern flexed the fingers, watching light ripple through the transparent components. Last night I saw a laboratory, a woman who resembles you but older, and diagrams of DNA both human and luminari. A chill ran down Rhiannon's spine. That's not possible. The prosthetic contains no memory storage components, just neural interface technology. Nevertheless, I see these things and there is more. Tavern hesitated, then continued reluctantly. I see a place, a structure buried beneath stone, ancient, important. Before Rhiannon could process this disturbing revelation, the distinctive whine of a scout ship cut through the air. They flattened themselves against the rock face as a luminary patrol craft soared overhead, its search beams sweeping the terrain. They're using thermal imaging, Rhiannon whispered, pulling a thermal blanket from her pack. It will not help, Tavern replied grimly. That is a Hunter-class scout. It can detect the unique radiation signature of my implants. She raised the prosthetic arm which had begun to pulse with an urgent rhythm, including this one. The scout ship banked sharply, clearly having detected something. Rhiannon's mind raced through options, none of them good. Can you, I don't know, deactivate it somehow? She asked desperately. Tavrin shook her head. It is part of me now. Then, surprisingly, a look of determination crossed her features. But perhaps. She closed her eyes, concentrating intensely. The prosthetic's glow shifted, changing frequency until it pulsed with a subtly different light. Above them, the scout ship hesitated in its trajectory, then resumed its original course, moving away from their position. When it was gone, Rhiannon released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. What did you do? I altered the resonance frequency, Tavrin explained, examining her arm with newfound respect. The arm, suggested it, showed me how to match the background radiation of this region. That's not a function I built into it, Rhiannon said uneasily. No, Tavrin agreed, it learned. The research outpost was exactly as Rhiannon remembered it, a low, bunker-like structure nestled against a cliff face, its exterior camouflaged to blend with the surrounding rock. Inside, emergency power systems still functioned, providing dim lighting and basic life support. No one has been here since your last visit, Tavrin confirmed after a thorough sweep. We are secure for now. Rhiannon immediately set up her portable medical scanner, connecting it to the outpost's more powerful systems. I need to examine that arm. If it's developing autonomous functions, we need to understand them. Tavrin submitted to the examination, watching with scientific curiosity as Rhiannon ran diagnostic after diagnostic. Hours passed in focused silence, broken only by the occasional murmur as Rhiannon discovered something new. She finally sat back, running a hand through her short hair. This is impossible. Yet it exists, Tavrin observed dryly. What have you found? The crystalline matrices in the prosthetic, they're replicating, not just growing, but evolving, integrating with your natural biology in ways I never designed. Rhiannon's voice held wonder and trepidation in equal measure. It's as if the arm is trying to become a true part of you, not just a replacement. And the dreams, the memories. Rhiannon hesitated. The only explanation I can think of is that the prosthetic somehow contains data storage I wasn't aware of, maybe in the salvaged luminary components. Show me your research, Tavrin said suddenly. The full data, not just on this arm but all your work on our species. Something in her tone made Rhiannon look up sharply. Why? Because I believe I know what this is. Tavrin's markings pulsed with intensity. The dreams, they are becoming clearer. They are not random, they are directions. Reluctantly, Rhiannon accessed the outpost's secure database, bringing up years of research, detailed studies of luminary physiology, comparative analyses with human biology, and the theoretical frameworks that had led to the creation of the prosthetic arm. Tavrin studied the data with the practiced eye of someone with scientific training, something Rhiannon hadn't expected from a military officer. Before the war, Tavrin explained, nodding Rhiannon's surprise, I was a research scientist, specializing in evolutionary biology. My people's military service is compulsory during conflict. You're a scientist, Rhiannon couldn't hide her shock. Why didn't you say something earlier? We were enemies, Tavrin replied simply. Now I am less certain of our status. She returned her attention to the data, focusing particularly on the comparative genomic analyses. There, she said finally, highlighting a sequence. And here, and here. Rhiannon leaned closer, frowning as she recognized the patterns Tavrin was identifying. Remarkable similarities in key genomic regions between humans and Luminari, despite their vastly different evolutionary paths. These could be coincidental similarities, she argued. Convergent evolution. Too many coincidences, Tavrin countered, and there is more. She held up her prosthetic arm, which now glowed with a steady pulse. The dream memories, they showed me a place, an installation buried deep beneath this planet's surface, predating both our civilizations. That's not possible. Helios 9 was uninhabited before human colonization 50 years ago. Uninhabited does not mean untouched. Tavrin brought her natural hand to the prosthetic, tracing the patterns of light that now closely resembled her original bioluminescent markings. I believe this arm is awakening something, genetic memory perhaps, or something embedded in the crystalline structures themselves. Before Rhiannon could respond, the outpost security system chimed an alert. Someone was approaching, a single individual, moving with purpose toward their location. They exchanged a glance of alarm. Rhiannon reached for the pulse pistol she'd taken from the medical facility, while Tavrin's prosthetic arm brightened with combat readiness. The outer door's manual override engaged. Someone was using an access code. As the inner door slid open, they both tensed, weapons raised. Dr. Naomi Akafer stepped into the room, her hands raised in placation. "Don't shoot, it's just me." "Naomi," Rhiannon lowered her weapon slightly, "how did you find us?" "I've been tracking you since you left the base," Naomi admitted. "Not easy when you're trying to avoid both human and Luminari patrols." Her gaze shifted to Tavern, widening at the sight of the evolved prosthetic. "That's not what it looked like when you attached it." "It's growing," Rhiannon said tersely. "Evolving, and apparently giving Tavern dreams about some ancient installation beneath the surface." Naomi's expression changed from surprise to grave concern. "You need to come with me, right now, both of you." "Why?" Rhiannon demanded, suspicion flaring. "Are you turning us in?" "If I wanted to do that, I'd have brought a military squad," Naomi retorted. "No, I'm taking you to someone who can explain what's happening with that arm, because I've seen something like it before." Naomi led them through a series of hidden passages beneath the outpost, tunnels that Rhiannon had never known existed. They descended deeper than seemed possible, the air growing progressively cooler and charged with strange energy that made the hairs on Rhiannon's arms stand on end. Tavern's prosthetic responded to the environment, its glow intensifying with each level they descended. More disturbing, her natural bioluminescent markings had begun to synchronize with the prosthetic's patterns, pulsing in perfect harmony. "What is this place?" Rhiannon asked, voice hushed in the cavernous space they'd entered. "We call it the Convergence," Naomi replied. "A small group of us discovered it 3 years ago, scientists from both sides who questioned the narrative of the war." The chamber they entered defied explanation. Ancient technology, neither human nor luminary in design, lined the walls, still operational after what must have been millennia. At the center stood a structure like a massive tree made of crystal and metal, pulsing with the same rhythmic light as Tavern's arm. More shocking were the people working in the chamber, humans and luminari, side by side without hostility. "Welcome to the Resistance," Naomi said with a grim smile. "The real one not fighting for either side but for the truth." An elderly luminari approached them, his bioluminescent markings faded with age but still elegant in their patterns. Behind him walked a human woman with silver hair and the bearing of someone used to command. "This is Elder Corvus," Naomi introduced the luminari, "and Professor Evangeline Vale." "Vale," Rhiannon's voice caught, as in. "Your grandmother, yes," the woman confirmed. "Though officially I died in the initial luminari attack on Helios 9. Rhiannon stood stunned, while Tavern stepped forward, holding up her prosthetic arm for the elder to see. The two luminari exchanged words in their native language, too complex for the translator to process, while the crystalline structures throughout the chamber seemed to respond to the prosthetic's presence. "It is as we predicted," Elder Corvus finally said in accented but perfect English. "The fusion has begun." "What fusion?" Rhiannon demanded. "What's happening to her arm to Tavern?" "Not just to her," Professor Vale said gently. "To both of you. The prosthetic isn't just a bridge between technologies, it's a bridge between your biologies. Your DNA profiles were specifically chosen for this project." "Project?" Rhiannon felt anger rising. "You experimented on us." "We created an opportunity," the professor corrected. "The war between humans and Luminari is based on a lie. We aren't different species who evolved on different worlds. We're branches of the same evolutionary tree deliberately separated eons ago." Elder Corvus gestured to the crystal tree structure. "This installation is one of many left by our common ancestors, beings who seeded both Earth and Lumina with variations of the same genetic template. The differences between us were engineered, not natural." "That's absurd," Rhiannon argued, though even as she spoke, her scientific mind was connecting dots. The unexplainable genetic similarities, the compatible neural architectures that had made the prosthetic integration possible in the first place. "The arm is proof," Tavern said quietly. "It does not merely connect our technologies, it is restoring what was once divided. The dreams, they are ancestral memories stored in the crystalline matrices that both our species carry in our DNA." As if in response to her words, the prosthetic pulsed brilliantly, and the central crystal tree responded in kind. Images began to form in the air between them, holographic projections of two humanoid species, gradually diverging from a common ancestor through artificial means. "The war serves those who wish to keep us separate," Professor Vale explained. "Power structures on both sides that would collapse if the truth were known." "Colonel Mercer knows about this place," Naomi added. "That's why she was so determined to find you both. The integration you've achieved threatens everything." Rhiannon looked at Tavrin, seeing her not as luminary, not as other, but as a reflection of what humanity might have become under different circumstances. The prosthetic arm between them glowed not with alien light, but with the light of recognition, of two parts of the same whole finding each other again. "What happens now?" Rhiannon asked, feeling the weight of revelation settling on her shoulders. "Now," Elder Corvus said gravely, "you complete the bridge." He guided them to the base of the crystal tree, where two recessed chambers waited, one sized for a human, one for a luminary. "The prosthetic connection between you has already begun the process," Professor Vale explained. "This will complete it, allowing you to access the full genetic memory of our ancestors. With that knowledge, we can finally end this pointless war." Tavrin looked at Rhiannon, violet eyes meeting gray. "Your human phrase, leap of faith." Rhiannon nodded, a smile tugging at her lips despite the gravity of the moment. "Seems like we've been taking those since the moment we met." They stepped into the chambers simultaneously. As the ancient technology activated around them, Rhiannon felt the strange sensation of her consciousness expanding, touching Tavrin's, then reaching beyond to countless others, human and luminary alike, connected through time and space by the genetic heritage they shared. The prosthetic arm, the bridge between worlds, pulsed one final time with blinding intensity. In that light, Rhiannon saw not just the path that had brought them here, but the path forward. A future where the artificial divisions between their peoples dissolved, revealing the common ancestry that had been hidden for too long. When the light faded, Rhiannon and Tavrin emerged transformed, not physically, but with an unshakable understanding of their shared origins and purpose. The prosthetic arm had evolved into something more than machine, more than flesh, a perfect synthesis of both their biologies, a living testament to what they once were and could be again. "It will not be easy," Tavrin said, examining her arm with newfound understanding. "Many will resist this truth." "Then we'll start small," Rhiannon replied, her voice firm with conviction. "One connection at a time, one bridge at a time." Professor Vale approached, her expression both proud and solemn. "The resistance has operatives throughout both military hierarchies. We can get you to the border regions where others like you, those who question the narrative, are gathering." "No," Rhiannon said, surprising herself with her certainty. "We need to go back." "Back?" Naomi looked alarmed. "To the base, that's suicide." "Not to surrender," Tavrin clarified, understanding Rhiannon's intent without needing it explained, their minds now subtly linked through the prosthetic connection. "To retrieve the research data, the medical applications, to show others what is possible between our kinds." Elder Corvus nodded slowly. "Yes, ideas are more powerful than weapons, healing more revolutionary than destruction." As they prepared to return to the surface to face the war with new purpose, Rhiannon studied Tavrin's arm, no longer just a prosthetic, but a symbol of what might be possible for all their peoples. What had begun as an act of medical necessity had evolved into something profound, a bridge between worlds that had been separate for far too long. "Ready?" she asked, reaching out her hand. Tavrin took it, natural fingers interlacing with synthetic ones. "Ready." Together, they stepped toward a future where the boundaries between them, artificial constructs maintained by those who profited from division, would finally begin to dissolve. The war had started with wounds, but perhaps Rhiannon thought it could end with healing.